the PS4 wasn't necessarily known for its local co-op experience. This is definitely the time where co-op gaming transitioned to mostly an online experience. But today we're going to talk about the top 10 couch co-op PS4 games. Before we get into the list, I understand that there are numerous indie games that were ported to the PS4 with couch co-op gameplay. But I wanted to talk about games that were exclusive to the PS4, or at least a unique experience for the console. So here we go. Starting with Fat Princess Adventures. This was a sequel to the PSP game Fat Princess, which is already known for its co-op gameplay. But this is a totally unique game. Unlike its predecessor, Fat Princess Adventures is a 4-player co-op hack-and-slash dungeon crawler. There are 4 different character classes: Warrior, Mage, Archer, and Engineer, each with their own unique abilities. You could switch between them on the fly to help you progress through various paths. Sometimes the titular Fat Princess herself comes into play, and she'll assist you with magic and healing spells as well. I never hear anyone talk about this game, and it has a great sense of humor. So if you see this one and you thought it was just shovelware, maybe give it a chance. The next game I want to talk about is Knack. This is a 3D platformer with co-op gameplay, somewhat similar to Crash Bandicoot or those classic mascot platformers that we knew and loved from the 90s. This was a game that was not necessarily met with positive feedback. Actually, a lot of people hate this game. I think that that's unfair. I just think that it came out at the wrong time. If this came out in the 90s, I think it would have definitely been more favorably reviewed. But overall, it's a pretty solid 3D platformer. It's worth revisiting today. We also had Knack 2, and it is a PS4 exclusive. Knack 2 is kind of more of the same. It's not reinventing the wheel, but it does improve upon what its predecessor started. And even though this game still received some average reviews, it was praised for its art direction, the cooperative gameplay, and the focus on platforming. Knack still has some of the same abilities. He has punching, kicking, changing size, and deflecting projectiles. There's also a skill tree, so you can slowly upgrade your abilities. As you progress through the game, you will acquire new abilities that you will need to use to move forward. Again, maybe not the best game on the PS4, but it's one that should be revisited. Just think of it as a continuation of 90s mascot platformers. And don't compare it to modern games like God of War, okay? The next game I want to talk about is called Playroom VR. This came out in 2016. It's just a series of mini games that are pretty much made to try out the VR headset. But one of those mini games is called Robots Rescue, and it's a precursor to Astrobot Rescue Mission. But this one has a cool co-op feature. It's ultimately a 3D platformer. But what makes it stand out is one player plays in the VR headset and the other player plays on the TV. And the objective is to rescue the various robots. But it just works really well as you each have your own screen to work with, making for a really unique experience. Unfortunately, it's more or less just a tech demo, and you can beat it pretty quickly, so there's not a lot of substance here. But I really wish that they would have included this type of gameplay in the future Astrobot games. Dragon's Crown Pro. It's an updated, remastered version of Dragon's Crown, which originally exclusively came out on the PS3, but this Pro version only came out on the PS4. It has all the same gameplay intact as the original Dragon's Crown. It's a 4-player co-op beat 'em up with some RPG elements. You can play as various different characters, and you work together to take on all the enemies. But you can also power up your characters and gain new abilities. I mean, this is really a top tier beat 'em up. The only thing that I didn't like about it is that later on in the game, you have to kind of go back and retread over some of the past levels and find the other path, and I didn't really enjoy that part. I just felt like it was a cheap way to artificially make the game bigger. And beat 'em ups, I think, shouldn't be more than a few hours long. But that being said, this is still a really great beat 'em up. Magika 2 came out on the PS4, but it also came out on the PC, so it's not specifically an exclusive, but it is the only console it came out on. If you enjoyed the first Magika game, this is more of the same. It's a top-down co-op RPG dungeon crawler, and you can play it with up to 4 players locally or online. The game has a pretty in-depth story that I honestly couldn't care less about, but it's just refreshing to see any kind of co-op game that's story-based. I mean, co-op RPGs are kind of a rarity, especially local ones, so Magika 2 is definitely a welcome addition to the genre. Alienation is a run-and-gun isometric twin-stick shooter with some RPG elements. This is a PS4 exclusive. You can play the game in 4-player co-op, locally or online. The game has its own classes where they have their unique skills and abilities. So playing with more characters, you have the opportunity for more representation for each class. Ultimately, Alienation is a really solid 4-player co-op game that's stuck on the PS4, and I think is kind of forgotten. So go back and try it if you get the chance. Earth Defense Force 5 is another PS4 game that also had a PC port, but the PS4 is the only console that it appeared on. If you're familiar with the Earth Defense Force series, they have a pretty good formula. Typically, you could play them in split-screen co-op. You play as these two characters that are heavily armed, and you go around, defend Earth against giant bug-like aliens. This game is known for its co-op gameplay, going all the way back to the PS2. And it's just really great that they continue to keep the local co-op intact in every single release. This whole series has a really fun, campy B-movie vibe, but they all have really solid gameplay as well. Definitely don't sleep on Earth Defense Force 5. LittleBigPlanet 3 is the game that came out when the PlayStation 3 was making the transition to the PS4, so it came out on both consoles. And if you're familiar with the series, it's just a really great 2D platformer, and it can be played with up to 4 players co-op. This is another great game in the series, and it still has all of the customization of characters that you would expect from a LittleBigPlanet game. This is a really solid platformer. We don't see a lot of 4-player co-op platformers, so it's just cool that the LittleBigPlanet series has made that a reoccurring feature. This is a pretty well-known series, so most of you know this one. I don't have much else to say about it, but if you haven't played it, definitely give it a try. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and talk about Sackboy Big Adventure. Similar to the previous generation, the transition from the PS4 to the PS5 had Sackboy Big Adventure, so you could play it on either console. But this took a lot of the same gameplay from the LittleBigPlanet series, but made it a 3D platformer. It still had the same customization and 4-player co-op gameplay. When I think about co-op 3D platformers, there's not a lot of them, but Sackboy Big Adventure is definitely at the top of the list, right up there with Mario 3D World. But this one has a really cool musical element as well. The level design and soundtrack kind of complement each other. This was also ported to Steam as well. Man, it's really hard to find couch co-op PS4 exclusives. As you can see, there's not a lot of them that were only on the PS4 and nothing else. But I still wanted to talk about this game. And the final game that I want to talk about is Helldivers. With Helldivers 2 getting all this attention and praise as an online co-op game, you might want to go back and check out the original game. This one actually had local co-op, and it's a top-down twin-stick shooter with some RPG elements. You and your friends are pitted against 3 different enemy species. In each procedurally generated mission, you must accomplish a series of objectives. At the start of every mission, you're able to choose the weapons that you want to use. This is a game with an unlimited amount of customization. One of the most fun parts about this game is once you complete all your objectives, you need to call for your dropship to take you to the next zone. However, you need to wait for 90 seconds. And while you're waiting, all of the enemies will be drawn to your location. So this adds a little bit of a survival mechanic to the game. Overall, this is definitely one of the better co-op games on the PS4, and it's still a PlayStation exclusive. However, it was also on the PS3 and the PlayStation Vita, as well as the PC. So there are 10 couch co-op games that are unique to the PS4. What are some games that we missed? And if you enjoyed this video, check out our video where we talked about co-op Wii U games. And thank you for watching.